Hey, everybody, welcome to the Constitution class today. It is what is today? Today the 5th? Today is December the 6th. Good Lord. Uh, Class is going to start here in about probably 10 minutes if you want to fast forward. So I'm just kind of logging in to let everybody jump in. It looks like we got a few people here already. Hello, Tiffany, Raging Smirk, Stephanie. How is everybody today? Oh, lots of stuff in the world going on, that's for sure. No shortage of events happening. And in all honesty, I haven't even hardly checked anything today. I have hardly looked at any news at all. Well, I, I don't know how much the gas price is like. I don't know how much the gas price is real. I see that it's because it's cheaper here too. I drove to Phoenix this weekend and it was cheaper, but I I don't know if that like this is like if it's like the tide receding before the tidal wave. Exactly. That's my thought, Stephanie. There goes our reserves. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's lower, but is that really because of the price is low or because we've been drilling and it's plentiful, or are they just like taking it from the reserves? So in a way, that's like it's a bad thing. Or the the other the other potential is uh the other potential, Heather, Mr. Gibbs. The other potential is that there's just not a lot of people driving, and so supply and demand. And when there's no demand, then the cost is down. So maybe that's the reason for some of the lower cost of the fuel. Mr. Gibbs, you're here early today, and pardon me because I'm going to eat today.
My Constitution class, I had to cancel it this morning because the wife's vehicle had problems, and so I canceled my class so I could pick her up, leave the vehicle there. We'll get our daughter-in-law has AAA, so we'll do that tonight when she gets home from work. And then my wife says, "Well, since you're not doing your class, what I was doing was errands. Let's go." But the errands took less time than the class and the meeting subsequent to the class. So here I am.
Here you are.
Mr. Warhamster isn't here. I thought he gets here
He
early.
just he texted me and he said he's got an issue, a network issue that he's resolving.
Okay.
So I was a little bummed out. There he is. Hello, guys.
So him wins the bet of when he was getting here.
I was a little bummed out. I had a vegetable tray in my refrigerator, and I brought it out, and it was. I think I had it in there too long because it was the veggies were like they were they were too little. They were a little too tangy. No good. So now I'm stuck with yogurt.
Stuck with yogurt.
Yeah. 000 on this one, and then I have the keto.
I got the pistachios rolling.
I overdosed on pistachios last night. We had a family friend in town who's a political operative in Maricopa County, so I got a chance to pick his brain on what's going on there. And I was over at my mom's, and she laid out the big tray of pistachios right in front of me, and I got carried away talking and eating, and I didn't realize I ate half the bowl.
Pistachios are amazing.
They are addictive.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when I eat pistachios, my dogs like pistachio. So they start begging me for pistachios. So it's like one for me, one for you, one for you. Yeah, the dogs love pistachios, and I looked it up, and it's actually very good for them.
What are we talking about today, guys?
Well, there's
There's
plenty
no
to
short.
talk about.
There's no
usual.
shortage of topics.
Yeah.
You guys want to hear the breaking news? Something that happened in the last hour?
Yeah.
Something happened the last hour. Okay, let's go for it.
Well, I'm sure everybody was paying attention to the Matt Taibbi doing the Twitter drops last Friday.
Yeah.
A couple of those tweets didn't match up. Numbers 10 and 23, they didn't seem to tell the full story. We were talking about that over the weekend. Well, it turns out that Twitter lawyer James Baker of the Spygate fame, guys all over the Durham report, apparently was getting in the middle of the Twitter files and Matt Taibbi, and he was censoring them. About an hour ago, Elon Musk tweeted out that James Baker has been fired, and they should expect to do some releases soon. But there was more FBI shenanigans.
James Baker being involved in suppressing.
Yes.
I was going to say James Baker was involved with suppressing Hunter Biden stuff, right?
Yeah, he's been involved in the whole thing. He joined Twitter around 2018 when he left the FBI. He was implicated in
I had no idea that he would have joined Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was one of the general counsels. So he's got his fingerprints all over the stuff, but Elon has now kicked him to the curb. And we should expect more releases soon, and these ones should be less censored. Because you guys know Ethan. I was talking to Ethan all weekend about, I go, wait a minute. Matt Taibbi is a very, very good reporter. I don't agree with him politically a lot, but the man has integrity. And he was reporting. Matt Taibbi was putting things out there that we know weren't true. We've heard Elvis Chan's testimony, and that basically he was the FBI and CISA were meeting with the big tech execs on a weekly basis leading up to the 2020 election. And Taibbi just glossed right over that and made it seem like it was an equal sharing with the Trump administration and the Biden campaign, and that's simply not true. So now we kind of understand why Taibbi wasn't getting the full story. So that's kind of interesting.
One of my favorites, latest in the news, is that the Democrats are mad at Saturday Night Live for doing a brain damage skit about Biden.
It's interesting. Saturday Night Live over the last 6 months has actually gone against the official narrative a few times. It's like they're almost trying to be funny again.
Well, they had that thing with Chappelle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great case in point.
I was stunned at that. Absolutely stunned at that.
That they would air that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chappelle. Yeah, I mean he threw smackdowns on people from all different sides of the political spectrum. He didn't pull any punches, or at least as much as you can for network TV.
All right, so Stephanie makes a comment in the chat room that I think needs to be brought on board, since I'm Mr. Constitution and we do need to do Constitution type stuff here. I missed the Citizens 1776 show live about Convention of States. My question is, if there is nothing in the Constitution, state Constitution or MCL, state law, how are delegates chosen? All right, so first of all, Brady was unable to attend. Mr. Andrew and I did cover other topics, but at the tail end of the show, we got into convention of states. When it comes to convention of states, conventions, while there is no instructions in the documents, conventions were a regularly used method of doing things. And so there's all kinds of examples and paperwork regarding conventions in general. Delegates cannot be office holders, and they are typically chosen to represent regions or districts that are established by the citizens of those districts or regions. And so you might, like, for example, my community might say, okay, if it's a constitutional, issue here, we want Mr. Constitution Douglas Gibbs, they might send me or whatever, because I'm the one known in my community to, be involved in this kind of stuff and understand it, but I'm not an office holder and I'm not tied to any party or anything like that. Office holders cannot be chosen. That said, also in conventions, units, no matter how many delegates they have one vote. So if it's a state convention, then each county would have one vote. If it's a countrywide, big convention like a convention of states, then each state is going to have one vote. So California might have 480 delegates and Rhode Island might have 6. Each state still has one vote when it comes to determining whether or not to propose a particular amendment that was discussed, argued, debated during the convention. Very good question, Stephanie. Thank you for posing it.
And yes, if we did have a convention of states, Doug and I would be working very hard to get invited to attend.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually, I even found a petition to get people to sign.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the gentleman we had dinner with last night, he's been a political operative for about 35, 40 years on a variety of issues, but his forte is getting petitions signed, delivered, and passed. So it's a pretty useful skill set to be able to tap into.
Very nice. What does he? Any update on what's happening with Arizona?
Well, now nothing that he didn't know anything that I didn't already know. But the real update is now that it's been certified, then they have 5 days to file lawsuits, which of course will be happening.
Yeah.
One of the suits got tossed because somebody was dumb enough to not use a lawyer that was registered to licensed to practice law in Arizona, which is just a really dumb mistake. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing that's come up with this Twitter stuff is that Katie Hobbs was in contact with Twitter's moderation, and people are asking Elon to release all of those communications. Mm-hmm. If she was interfering in her own election by getting Twitter censored, that strengthens the lawsuit.
Right.
She is absolutely involved, and she is going to be in some very deep doo-doo, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, we just got to find a judge that'll take the case.
Stephanie, when it comes to my responses, looking for statute, something that's in guidance in law regarding how the delegates will be chosen. There is no guidance in law. This is based on how they've always, the precedent that's been set by past conventions.
Yeah, there's also, I don't know if I watched the show that I missed on Friday, Doug, and I don't think you guys mentioned this, but it's interesting at a convention when they send amendments out to be ratified, they can determine whether that should be ratified by a vote of the people or by the legislature.
Well, each state can determine that, or they can determine that from the convention, or Congress can determine that. And that's a debate on who really has that decision.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it's been deemed to work. The last several amendments, as we talked about recently, Doug, is
those who proposed the amendment.
And they were starting to put time limits and actually putting more strict instructions on exactly how it could be ratified.
Right.
And it makes sense. If you have something that you think you can get through the legislature but not through the people, you're going to do it that way.
Right. Well, the 18th and the 21st Amendments are actually great examples of that. Prohibition. Mm-hmm. If you read the 18th Amendment, and it indicates, and this is to put prohibition into place, it has to be done by the legislatures thereof, because the people are not going to approve something like that. But when they wanted to repeal prohibition with the 21st Amendment, if you read it, it's instructed that it will be done by convention, which is delegates voted in by the people. So absolutely, choosing the way to ratify is an important tool. Now, I got something else I'd like to talk about that this audience may or may not have heard about yet. And I'm not going to get into names per se, but I'm going to get into the situation or the potential situation. Some of you are familiar with the fact that I am a part of a group, Constitution Association, that filed a lawsuit against Kamala Harris for being ineligible for office. Real quick background for those of you not familiar with the case, then you can read the petition. A link to it is available at constitutionassociation.com, constitutionassociation.com. And basically, the final sentence of the 12th Amendment says that the vice president must meet the same eligibility requirements as the president. In Article 2, it states that the president must be a natural-born citizen, which means VP also has to be a natural-born citizen. So then the question becomes, how is a natural-born citizen determined? Well, when it came to the discussion during the convention, they did not define natural-born citizen in the Constitution. It was readily understood because it was based on a concept known as natural-born subject, which was an English concept. And it had to do with inheritance rights and all that other stuff. And so that said, also, the idea of natural-born citizen goes all the way back to the Greeks. So it was a concept that was, for the most part, widely understood. That said, they did have a resource, a legal resource they used. It was called Vattel's Law of Nations. Vattel was a Swiss who spoke French, who decided to take the Western world's legal definitions and put them all into one, basically, set of books. It's a 2-book set, and Vattel's Law of Nations at the time. And in I believe it was 62. I'm trying to remember the year now, but I think it's 1760 actually. 1760, the French version was published, and then like 1762, an English translation was published. So during the Constitutional Convention, 3 copies of Vattel's Law of Nations were on the floor at the convention. George Washington brought the English translation. Benjamin Franklin brought a French translation and an English translation, making 3 copies on the floor. So it was an important resource. So for anybody who wants to argue with you, well, Vattel's Law of Nations doesn't matter, it wasn't important, then why did they have 3 copies on the floor of the convention? It was an important resource. That tells you it was right there. And according to Vattel's Law of Nations, to be a natural-born citizen, it requires both parents to be citizens at the time of birth. This is a key because the Founding Fathers, especially if you read the first dozen Federalist Papers, fear of divided loyalty, fear of intrusion from other countries, messing with the Union, all of that, those fears were very real. So having your commander-in-chief not have a risk of having divided allegiance was kind of a big deal. And Tories tended to have at least one parent who was still a British subject or born in Britain. And so the idea of a natural-born citizen would, for the most part, knock the Tories out of contention for president or vice president of the United States. So if being a natural-born citizen is both parents are citizens at the time of birth, then that would mean that by his own admission, Barack Obama was not eligible. Everybody was so busy arguing about where he was born that they didn't focus on who his parents were. In the case of Kamala Harris, while she was born on American soil, Oakland, California, some of you who have been to Oakland might contest that statement that it's American soil, but that's a different topic for some other time. It's kind of an interesting area. Just hold your nose because of all the homeless. But anyway, and so she was born in Oakland, but her parents were there on student visas. They were visitors. They weren't even going through the process to immigrate. Whether or not they did later is not the point. At the time of her birth, there had been no no effort to become American or at least become a resident, a permanent resident through immigration law or through, processes. They were there on student visas. So they were visitors. And by the way, they were both very, very, very communist too, but that's beside the point. So she is not eligible. Neither one of her parents were citizens at the time of her birth. Therefore, she's not a natural born citizen. She's not eligible. So on December 7th, 2020, Constitution Association, myself, George Rombach, Dennis Jackson, and a number of others were listed because, give strength in numbers, so to speak, filed a lawsuit against Kamala Harris. It took about a year for the Southern District Federal Court to respond. And they dismissed the case, stating that the Congress has the authority to determine eligibility. And by putting this case in play, it pitted the courts against Congress. And because of separation of powers, a political question of that type cannot be presented in the courts.
Exactly where it needs to be presented.
Exactly. So we appealed. We appealed the case to the Ninth Circuit, arguing that Congress does not have the authority to determine eligibility. So the political question argument and separation of powers argument does not apply here. The reason why is because of the enumeration doctrine. The federal government or any part of the federal government only has an authority if it's either specifically enumerated in the Constitution, expressly enumerated, or it's necessary and proper in order to carry out an enumerated power. And which is in Article 1, Section 8 of the tail end there, the what they call the elastic clause. And therefore, Congress does not have the authority because the authority regarding eligibility is not in the Constitution whatsoever. Now, if there's an authority not in the Constitution, then who has the authority? Well, there's this wonderful thing called the 10th Amendment that answers that question for us. In the 10th Amendment, it says that if a power is not delegated by the Constitution to the United States, nor prohibited by it to the states, the power is reserved to the states or to the people, respectively. So what that means is the power to determine the eligibility belongs to the states, which from a legal standpoint would essentially mean the state
legislature,
political apparatus, governmental apparatus. In the case of states, typically it's the Secretary of State and the state legislature. And then it says or to the people. Doesn't mean instead of or people in the sense of or. It means that the people also enjoy that. It's one or the other. And in the case of eligibility, since the states didn't do its job, it falls definitely upon the people to ensure that the eligibility requirement is met.
Doug?
Yes.
The way I was trying to explain that recently, and I was hoping you could fine tune this one a little bit, I was trying to explain what that meant was if the states do not act upon one of their powers when they should, the people then have the right to do so on their own behalf.
They have the right anyway, but they definitely do if the states aren't doing their job. You're right, essentially, but it kind of falls on the people with the states, or if the states don't, people still can.
And the people's only real avenue of that is to sue. It's
when you also have to look at the Ninth Amendment. It is our right to have those, to carry out those powers, those authorities. And the Ninth Amendment says if a right's not indicated and enumerated in the Constitution, that right can't be disparaged by the federal government. So we're trying to carry out our right to make sure that the proper person who's eligible is in office, and they're disparaging it with trying to shoot us down with technicalities, all that. So they're really violating the Ninth Amendment by not giving us the opportunity to provide oral argument and really get this into the court system. But now that said, I've been waiting for this to be carried out. I've been waiting for oral arguments because I want to give my oral argument in front of a bunch of federal judges on this topic. And so it's been in the Ninth Circuit since February. And we've been waiting patiently. And then we have friends around the country that have offered help with what we are doing. We also gave a press conference in front of Temecula City Hall a couple of years ago when we first got this rolling. As a matter of fact, somebody in my Xeno class had taken a film of it. They were there and they were showing people our press conference. But anyway, so what has happened is there's an individual back in New Jersey who has connections. He knows people. He knows people with money. He knows people in the political system. At first, he tried to get our case to a lot of the political operatives and donors and all that out there. And while a lot of people were jazzed about what we're doing, nobody offered any assistance or monetary help. So then he decided, okay, he'd start hammering on the Republican Party. And he worked all the way up to the GOP chairman of the state party there in New Jersey. And the GOP chairman's response essentially was, this is just another birther case. It's going nowhere. Besides, she was born American soil. That makes her eligible, which is the misnomer. Then there's a particular, and I want to be careful giving out his name because I want to make sure it's for sure when he does it. And then I'll start throwing his name around more. But there's a Republican, New Jersey Republican, and me giving you the details, you probably figure it out, but that's beside the point. And the seat just got flipped. In the last election he tried, and he narrowly didn't get it. This election, he got it. Seat's been flipped, conservative Republican, and our friend in New Jersey has been talking to him about our case. And so he is jazzed about what our case is about, but he doesn't want to wait for the courts. He thinks the way to do it, and we can debate until the cows come home whether or not it's a better method. I'm just happy that it gets out there. I don't care how at this point. I just want the public to know about this case. But he believes the way to do it is for him, once he's in office on January 3rd, to file articles of impeachment against Kamala Harris using our case and the data in our petition as the foundation. Now, that may require me to give testimony before Congress. Oh, I hope it does. That puts a smile on my face. I was talking to one of my compadres, George Rombach, yesterday in a meeting yesterday morning, and he right now is working on the articles of impeachment because it's been requested that we come up with a draft for him to use so that he can then, with his staff, fix it or whatever. But, a starting point, in other words, where we have, because we know the particulars of our case better than anybody. That way, the draft of the articles of impeachment against Kamala will come from us originally. I'll be meeting with George the next week or two to help him with that draft. But George is the treasurer of the Constitution Association. He has a law degree, but not a bar number. Now, our concern had been we do have a lawyer, a semi-retired lawyer who basically hasn't charged us because we do all the work. Basically, he's basically allowing us to rent his bar number essentially and his voice every once in a while. But if we go to the Supreme Court, because we're expecting to have to appeal the Supreme Court, then we're going to need somebody who has that ability, has a credential, because our lawyer doesn't have the credentials to go before the Supreme Court. And since the organization, the Constitution Association, is a part of it, that does two things. Number one, it requires a lawyer because an organization is not an individual. Boy, that sounds like somebody's amendment. But anyway, an organization is not an individual, so it needs representation, number one. And number two, because it needs representation, but it's an organization, it's actually necessary to be a part of it because it is the party in the case that actually has full standing because the organization has expended volunteer hours and money because of her violating the Constitution. They could very well argue that me as an individual or George as an individual or Dennis as an individual doesn't have standing, but the organization does. That's part of the reason why we did that, to make sure standing wasn't an issue. So we need to make sure we get a lawyer. So we have been in contact with people. There's a retired federal judge in San Diego County who's considering taking on our case for the Supreme Court. But if it goes before Congress, That may not be necessary, or it may sway so that we do get accepted with the Supreme Court. We'll see. But anyway, so that's kind of the news going on. Why this is important is because it hammers home something that's been showing up lately that's got the Democrats upset: the enumeration doctrine. Dobbs case is a great example. The Dobbs case said, hey, Roe v. Wade was wrong because the federal government doesn't have the authority. They should have never taken that case. Therefore, we're sending it back to the states. That's the enumeration doctrine. That's our argument. They don't have, based on the enumeration doctrine, the authority to determine eligibility. That's up to us in our states. And so what's going on in the courts right now also helps the case. And that's part of what we're going to make sure we include in our articles of impeachment, because we do have recent judicial precedent, case law, whatever you want to call it, that supports our position. So there you go. Stephanie says, if I go before Congress, she says, I want tickets for that show.
You'll be
I have so many people telling me that, Stephanie, that I feel like I'm gonna have to go buy a Partridge Family bus to take everybody with me.
I'll raise the money for it. Hey, I'm going to ask a question. I don't think we've ever really addressed this one, but
okay.
Something popped into my head when you were doing this, and I know Ron's going to love this question. So get ready for this, Mr. Partain.
Hang on, let me put on my seatbelt for this one. All right, go ahead.
Well, we've got an inordinate amount of Congress critters currently that have dual citizenship, particularly with a certain country in the Middle East.
Well, only with one country in the Middle East.
Is that only? I don't know.
There are no dual citizens with any other country than that.
I'm going to fact check you on that, but I'll roll with it for now because I don't know the answer. But
is that country with the initials SA?
No,
negative.
No. It's
only a single one with a letter I.
Yeah, it's a country that was just founded.
End with a Q or an N?
1948.
Ends with an I or an L.
L?
It ends with an L. Starts with an I and ends with an L.
Oh, come on, Doug.
It has a white flag with a 6-point star on it.
Well, we're talking about Israel, since Doug is not going to figure that out on his own.
Oh, I'm looking for some Muslim country. Okay.
Yeah. So there's an awful lot of U.S. Congress critters. Ron, what's the number? It's over 100, isn't it?
All right. Now,
that's
a good question. I'm going to let Brady finish the question, but
yeah,
I definitely have an opinion on this. Go ahead.
Okay. But it's not just Congress people. It's people that are involved in high positions of government, whether they're appointed by Secretary of State. Not saying that he is, but I'm just saying whether they're appointed or voted in.
So yeah, that is also true. My question is more constitutionally: have they ever debated whether people serving in Congress or the federal government in other manners, which would be less important to me, but are they able to have dual citizenship? Because we talk about the founding fathers debated.
They were worried about divided loyalties.
Exactly. So, I mean, I've never really seen any debates on that.
Technically, there's no provision that says yes or no. And so, from a current legal standpoint, technically, I think a dual citizen could hold office. Now, that said, if the founding fathers saw dual citizenship coming, they probably would have shot that down quickly. Not only for office holders, but for Americans in general. I think dual citizen on its own would never have been acceptable to the framers of the Constitution.
I agree.
So in 1776 or 1781, whenever the United States officially began, I guess that would be the Articles of Confederation, did everybody have to declare whether you're a citizen of the United States or a citizen of Great Britain?
I can't answer that because I don't know what they actually did when it came to that issue, but I do know that dual allegiances was a concern. And I will say this, because the Tories had a dual allegiance with Britain, they were tarred, they were feathered, they were sent out of the country. So while there may or may not have been statutes requiring you to either become a citizen or get the hell out, there was definitely actions by citizens that basically did that when it came to the Tories.
And
A dual allegiance was divided loyalty. That was a big deal.
yeah, that's why I brought it up, because it's at the heart of the fundamental natural.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised now that we're talking about it, thinking about it, that there is nothing really getting into that. I mean, natural born citizen, that's what it was kind of all about. And to hold office, you need to be a citizen. And I don't know if it's because the founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, the people that time didn't see dual citizenship coming, or they did, or it kind of existed, but there are certain people they felt should be able to stay regardless.
You know,
could have been one or the other. I don't know.
There was a very interesting. This is going to be Hollywood, and I understand that, but there was a very interesting scene in John Adams when John Adams is the first. What is it? What do they call it? The plenipotentiary or whatever. I don't know how to say that correctly. He was the first person to go see King George. Once the United States, once they recognized the United States as an independent country,
right?
And he said something about. He said, something about loyalty, and he says, I vow that, or I know what he said. He said, the king says, there are many who say that you don't have any, that your loyalty to France is not, it really isn't all that much. And he says, well, I must confess that I only have loyalty to my own country. And he said, and then the king said, an honest man will have no other. And I believe that having dual citizenship,
that's great. That's a good scene. I remember that scene.
That I believe that, and there's a reason. I firmly believe there is a reason that Team 17 referred to Israel by saying that they will be saved for last. There's a lot of things about that country that are not what we have been taught to believe. And anyway, I'm gonna shut up because I'm gonna get myself in a lot of trouble.
Ron, I knew you were gonna love my question, and I appreciate your restraint because I know this is one of your favorite topics. So
yeah, I am no fan of that country by any stretch of the imagination.
I don't hold the same disdain, but at the same time, I'm not an opposite side of the coin either. It depends on which group or which segment of that population we're talking about. From my point of view,
look up the USS Liberty. Look up the USS Liberty and then tell me that.
Now that I know the story. Now that said, my position here is not about that country. My position is about dual
loyalty or dual allegiances.
Now, what the question is from a constitutional or political standpoint, regardless of who it is.
You also might want to look up Cynthia McKinney, what she stated, what she was forced to do and refused to do, and as a result of being refused to do, was essentially kicked out of Congress.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to send us a link on that one, Ron.
Cynthia. Okay, so look up Cynthia McKinney swearing an oath to Israel. Every member of Congress, when they get into Congress, every member of Congress has to write a paragraph swearing their allegiance and loyalty to Israel.
I need to see that documented. That would be a bit of a
that's something that's hard to chew on.
I would
Well,
so my question. So we've determined that there is nothing in the Constitution that talks about eligibility. You got to think it's going to impact security clearances and stuff like that with the dual citizenship, but apparently but it doesn't, and it's interesting. Stephanie asked a question in chat, which I'd like to take first crack at. She says, another convention of states question, there's literature circulating that topics of such a convention would be limited. Can we expand on the legitimacy or not of that claim? Stephanie, I have been in discussions for years with the Convention of States Action people, Mark Meckler's group, and there's some pretty sharp people. And they've been wanting me to join as a district captain and everything like that for years. And I have not because of this exact question. Mark Meckler has stated very strongly that they can limit what is brought up at the Convention of States. And my argument is nowhere in the Constitution does it say that in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
That brings up the specter of the quote unquote runaway convention, where they can vote away the whole Constitution and all our rights. And well, first of all, I would like a runaway convention because there's a lot that needs to be run back to what it used to be. But we've got our defense against that is the fact that it only takes 13 states to say no to any changes in the Constitution. And if we live in a nation that has any rationality whatsoever, they're not going to be able to run it away in a different direction. But that exact question about whether or not you can limit what is, once they agree to convene in a convention of states, my interpretation is that everything is on the table to be proposed.
Everything's on the table, but that doesn't mean they can do whatever they want to the Constitution. It still requires 3/4 ratification, which, like you said, you got 13 countries or states can say we don't like it, and that's it. It's done. It's dead. And so if we've got 3/4 of states ratifying things that changes the country so drastically that destroys our Constitution, we got bigger problems.
The country's already over with.
First of all. Second of all, the argument has always been, well, gosh, the left wants a convention of states so they can get control of it and rewrite the Constitution. No, they don't. They're doing just fine ignoring the Constitution.
George
They
Soros,
don't want attention brought to the Constitution. And that's the reason why Soros has pumped however much money,
55 million.
55 million, into an effort to stop Convention of States, because they don't want attention to the Constitution. They want their judicial fiat to be the Constitution. That's where they want you to focus on. And if a Convention of States happens, then everybody remembers, oh, shucks, there's a document there somewhere. They don't want people like me to have the opportunity to open my mouth and everybody be able to hear it. So they want to do everything they can.
Well, that's why
it's so
important it's be a transparent process, because there's going to be a Doug or a me or a Ron that's going to be there, and we're going to call these people out and say, no, that's not what we're doing here, and I'm going to tell the whole country about it. And the people are going to listen to our arguments. And what you're going to find, what you would find at a convention of states, is either nothing gets done because people send a bunch of partisan hacks, or they send reasonable people, and you find compromise. Now, and I didn't get a chance to say this on Friday, but the Doug sort of borrowed my favorite line, and I appreciated it. You know, the founding fathers gave us one tool to rein in a federal government that steps outside of its lane. We've never used it in 240 years. And I suggest that's because the federal government will do everything in their power to not let us put them back in their lane. We absolutely should have a convention of states. Absolutely everything should be on the table. It should be transparent. Trust in the fact that common sense and good judgment will prevail.
And I will say this, because I talk to John Birch Society people and Eagle Forum people all the time about this.
Me too.
And because they are scared to death of it. I am not on the John Birch Society Speakers Bureau because of my position on convention states. Eagle Forum only lately is finally starting to talk to me, and that's only because a friend of mine is president of the statewide organization, part of the office. Now, excuse me, hang on a sec. That said, I tell my John Birch Society friends and my Eagle Forum friends the same thing. Thank you for being paranoid as hell, because when it does happen, you're going to be all over to make sure it isn't run away and out of control and controlled by outside forces that we don't want sticking their nose into it because of your paranoia. So thank you for fearing what you fear, because when it happens, and it will happen, you're going to be an important tool to make sure it stays on the proper course.
When what happens?
Convention of States.
So you are of the opinion that a convention of states will happen no matter, regardless. I
see it happening. I see, as attention continues to grow and people continue to get pissed off, I see it as an inevitability. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would say
I see convention of states and nullification as two inevitabilities.
Well, nullification took a really. I was really hoping Carrie Lake would start to lead that parade. We're gonna have to hope she finds a way to get in, or find another governor to start working on, because nullification has to happen tomorrow. You know, it's people ask me, we always talk about how far off the track of the Constitution we've gotten. And everyone goes, what can we do? I go, look, we've got the power to take back this country starting tomorrow. It just takes one state nullifying, the federal government overstepping their bounds. They've done
Stephanie,
it.
you make a great point there. It's only an amendment process, not an abolition of it. Exactly.
Is my voice back on?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah. Anyways, I lost my train of thought.
I think you were, whatever.
I was getting on my soapbox of how we can take back the country tomorrow, which we can. We really can. The states still have the power. They really do. I mean, the federal government kept infringing this. There are a finite number of governmental powers. And according to the numeration doctrine, the federal government really only existed to handle international affairs and to settle disputes among states or between states. Those were enumerated. And the federal government has, over the last 200 or so years, kept taking more and more of those powers. But they didn't go through the actual process. Look, they say the Constitution is a living and breathing document. Yes, it is. There is a process to change it. It's called the amendment process. If you want to change the Constitution, feel free to try. Amend it, because that takes a slow, deliberate process that's not based on knee-jerk reactions from winning one election. Let people have a reasonable conversation, and if 3/4 of the country agree with you, feel free to change it. That is the way the founding fathers wanted it to be, a slow, deliberate process. Well, that's not what the federal government did. They just kept incrementally taking our rights. But because they didn't use the constitutional process and the Constitution is still intact, all we have to do is assert our rights starting tomorrow, and we put them back in their little rat holes, hopefully to stay for a long, long time. So, yeah, this is fixable constitutionally. And, we've talked about a number of ways we can do that. Between Reynolds v. Sims, 17th Amendment, Convention of States, there's a bunch of avenues open to us.
Reynolds v. Sims has been on the tip of my tongue during this whole conversation.
I'm curious about Raging Smirky says Texit. I'm wondering, is he meaning Texit as in Texas is going to secede, exit, or?
Yeah, let me touch this one. Being a native-born Texan, I have always known about this one. Texans proudly claim that they are the only one of the 50 states that can legally secede. And it is a fascinating constitutional argument, because the Republic of Texas existed before they were part of the United States. The background of this is, we could do a whole show on this one. Now, should Texas secede? That's an interesting conversation. But that's what he's referring to.
Now, in short, Texas
we assume that's what he's referring to.
Well, in short, though, Texas is not the only state to secede. They all could. They all have that option. The judicial branch doesn't say they can, but the Constitution does.
Well, if that's the case, then Abraham Lincoln orchestrated an illegal invasion of the southern states.
Absolutely, he did. He invaded another country illegally.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you're going to get any argument on this show on that one.
No, you're not.
Now, that said, I'm curious about Darren Hatchett's comment. Too many governors have taken away the money to not do the right thing. I want to know the context to that statement.
Basically, they're so reliant on federal funding for schools, for roads, for everything else like that, that they can't say no, because their entire state apparatus would basically be bankrupt the next day. That's part of the trap the federal government has done by passing all this legislation that's just so fully encompassing of everything. That's what I believe there, and I'm making your argument for you pretty well. But the conversation came up last year when DeSantis started, speaking up a little bit about some nullification ideas without following through, I might add. And by the way, he just compromised with Disney, meaning Disney's going to get now 99% of what he wanted, but DeSantis got the good headlines on that one. So, sorry to digress, but Ron DeSantis certainly has talked a really good game when it comes to nullification. The follow through has not been there that we would expect someone like a Kerry Lake to actually do. Remember, we saw the hullabaloo a couple weeks ago when Texas, basically said they're going to start enforcing their border.
Right.
Have we seen any follow through on that yet?
No.
These people talk a great game. Let's see some action.
Now, let me say this. Because Stephanie makes a comment, and congratulations on your comment, but I want to tie it into things I've talked about before. I've always talked about how things begin locally and we need to decentralize. In order to handle things locally, we need to be involved either by frequenting these meetings or infiltrating. And when I say infiltrating, we need to be holding these positions. And the best positions to hold are in the central committees because they're the ones that choose the leadership. They're the ones involved in whether or not there's proxy votes and so on and so forth. And Stephanie has told us in the chat that she was able to secure the vice chair of her county's GOP executive committee. I am jazzed because that's exactly, as patriots, what we need to be doing. I was on the central committee in the past. Let's just say it may not happen for a while. I did it while there was friendlies in play, and so now I'm on the outside again. But I am jazzed for what you pulled off, Stephanie. That is huge. We definitely need to be infiltrating. We need to be involved. We need to be on the inside. We need to do to them what they've done to us, in a sense. We need to grab those places of control so that we can, kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, put our will into place.
Our good friend Tyler Gaffney ran for local Congress in an area mostly of the city of Chula Vista. I had the pleasure of forwarding him a Fox News report where Chula Vista came out as the most, what was the term, decrepit or lacking in integrity or morals of any major city of over 50,000 people in the United States of America. And so acting locally is going to matter. Thought that was interesting that Chula Vista came out number 1 in the country. For those who don't know, Chula Vista is a border town here in San Diego.
Yeah, it's literally, almost literally anyway, right on the other side of the fence.
You would see an awful lot of methamphetamines, etc., being sold outside of 7-Eleven on every street corner.
or as we used to call it when I was younger, my apologies to the gangbangers of the area, Cholo Vista.
But, we always called it Chulawana.
Chulawana.
Yeah, Chulawana.
But anyway, that all said, yeah, when I was in construction, I did a lot of work down there in Chula Vista, and we would stay at the hotels down there because it's such a long drive from Orange County, which is where our equipment comes from, and we would always be nervous about all of our equipment in the parking lot there, the hotel there in Chula Vista, because all the construction stuff and all this. But anyway.
We were talking about the states getting financed.
San Bernardino. Sorry, the chat room cracked me up. Go ahead.
That is true.
Go ahead, Warhamster.
I'm just laughing. There's some pretty good nicknames for most of California's towns, but
yeah.
Let's not go there.
Right next to Cholo Vista is Nasty City, for example. But anyway, go ahead.
So here's a fun one that comes up quite a bit when you talk about nullification. And Doug's addressed this to me in person before, and I think it could be. I think this show would enjoy this. The question on the table is: can a state just start? Because what happens when you nullify? The government's going to say, "Okay, we're going to cut off your funding for all these programs," and the state's going to say, "Okay, we're going to cut off our remittances via W-2." Doug, you want to address exactly how that works? Because you gave a really good explanation not long ago on this one.
I don't remember how I explained it, but I'll go with what's in my head right now.
Please.
So you got to remember, let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. W-2 withholding is a state's decision. It's not a federal decision. Now, remember, prior to the 16th Amendment, the states are the ones that paid federal tax. They're the ones that gave the federal government its money. And we have to remember that was a very different method in this sense. As a taxing agency on individuals, the federal government takes tax money from you. But as an entity created by the states, it had to request money from the states when it came time for taxes. Totally different dynamic here. They're not taking the money, they're requesting the money. And if they're requesting the money, what is that saying about the states? The states can say, well, we don't like the way you're spending the money, so we're not going to pay you until you fix it. Now, the 16th Amendment enabled direct taxation. W-2 withholding didn't begin until during the Great Depression. Actually, I think it was at the very beginning of the war too. Because what was happening was at the time is the rich were being taxed and they paid it at the end of the year. So, okay, well, we need more money. We don't have enough money here. We got to get it out of the average guy too. But the average guy is not going to be able to afford to pay a big tax bill at the end of the year. So how do you do it? You create W-2 withholding. And so the states agreed, and what they did is they began to take a little bit out of your paycheck, just a little bit at a time. That way it doesn't hurt you. You can pay your taxes a little bit at a time. It's no big deal. And eventually what eventually became a tendency was, oh, we took too much. You have a refund. So people are being taxed and they're excited about it because at the end of the year, they might get some money back. Think about the scam for a second.
You just gave an interest-free loan to the U.S. government.
Exactly. Interest-free loan to the government. Now, that said, that's the reason why I've always tried to do my numbers where I pretty much get nothing back and owe nothing in the year. I try to get it as close to zero as possible. But nonetheless, so now if the states are the ones that are in control of W-2 withholding and the federal government's going to threaten to withhold money, then I'm waiting for the first state to say, you know what? That's fine. We won't send you the money in the first place. It's our money anyway. You want the money, you could tax us as a state.
Okay, so here's my question. Here's what gets interesting.
Okay.
How would that work? I work for XYZ Corporation, and my company takes the withholding and sends it directly to the government. It doesn't go through the state at all.
Right. State's going to have to take back its sovereignty. It's going to have to completely redo everything. Yeah. Our problem is, though, in the beginning, when W-2 first began, it did work through the states. The federal government has slowly but surely taken over every part of the process.
And by the way, Doug, it was the war when the W-2 started.
Okay, yeah, it's like 42, I want to say.
I've got 41 in my head, but I know it was the war.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you and I are
we declared war. I think we declared war in December, like December 8th.
Yeah, I think that's correct. 2 days after Pearl Harbor, right, Ron?
A day or two, yeah.
And Pearl Harbor is December 6th, correct?
December 7th.
December 7th.
That's what, tomorrow?
Yes.
Yeah, tomorrow's Pearl Harbor Day.
Well, we're short on time, so there's something else going on tomorrow that we cannot get through the show without talking about, and that's because Moore versus Harper is going to be argued on the Supreme Court floor.
Oh, really?
That is tomorrow.
That is tomorrow. I've been wanting to write an article about Moore v. Harper. This without getting into the big details, what this does is this really, what it does is it brings this front and center, and more specifically, Article 1, Section 4. Does Article 1, Section 4 mean it when it says only the state legislature is supposed to take care of elections, and that the courts are not mentioned, and so they really have no business being involved or striking down what a legislature does? Well, Doug, then there's got to be a check. What if the legislature's out of control? That's why Congress, when it comes to Senate and House elections, also have the ability to make rule changes if necessary. They're the check. And of course, the people are the checks too. If things out of control, you throw the people out. But the courts are not supposed to be involved. That's what Moore v. Harper is all about. Now, if you want to go into details, Brady, please do.
Yeah, so Moore versus Harper is about North Carolina gerrymandering. See that, Doug? I said it right.
I'm proud of you.
Yes, I've been saying gerrymandering my whole life, like most of you, but it is gerrymandering.
I'm curious as to why. I'm.
Go ahead, Doug.
Elbridge Gerry was his name, and they had redrawn the district in such a way that the journalist said that the district looked like a salamander, but since his last name was Gary, they called it a gerrymander
instead of a salamander. Anyways, I love that story. Isn't that a great story? It's one of those really fun factoids that I'll bring up at a cocktail party, and people are going to look at me and go, "Do you have a life?" Well, yeah, a little bit, but anyways.
Yeah, well, you've traded baseball trivia for history, American history trivia.
Yeah, well, it's better when I would have done stock market trivia. Actually, back then everyone listened. Like, really? What should I buy? Stop it. I'm not giving advice here, people. So what happened was North Carolina gerrymandered in a manner that basically 12 of the 13 districts were going to go Republican. It was a pretty extreme gerrymandering. It gets challenged by the Democrats. It goes to the North Carolina Supreme Court. They overturn it and force some outside third party to set the congressional districts. And in North Carolina still went, I think, 10 or 11 seats to the Republicans because North Carolina is turning very red, which is good. That's why our good friend Bill now lives there.
Right.
That being said, this made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, the left is going absolutely nuts over this because if this Supreme Court upholds state legislatures' rights over to set their own election laws, as dictated in Article 1, Section 4, they're saying there's going to be no check and balance. These legislatures can do whatever they want. They can, you can run an election. They can just send their own electors. Well, no, that's not really what they're trying to do. But where it gets really interesting is we're pretty sure that the state legislature's rights to set election laws is going to be upheld.
Yeah.
That's very likely, which is good. That means a lot of all these fights over, mail-in balloting, signature matching, everything like that, it's going to start favoring the Republican side. That's a good thing. There is a snowball's chance, depending on who writes the opinion, that Pennsylvania is going to be able to state, we sent dual electors in 2020. The state legislature did. We did not agree with the results that were certified. We sent dual electors. We are now withdrawing our electors for Joe Biden. And that becomes mayhem. That brings the 2020 election back into play. This is what they are afraid of. It's a very unlikely scenario. It's a good thing if Moore wins over Harper. Do I have that right? I think Moore's the good guy here. Because it allows us to actually have state legislatures actually write their own election law. So it's a very important case. They'll be hearing the arguments tomorrow. Don't expect the results until mid-spring. But tomorrow, leftist legal Twitter is going to be an absolute battleground, and I'm going to be in the middle of it just having fun.
There was a comment about Twitter the other day that I found very interesting. People was like, oh, well, he's just gone all conservative. No, actually, the opposite is true. He has just gone non-statist, whereas Musk is allowing both sides of the argument to speak without being censored. He's not censoring leftists from talking. He's just not censoring right people or people on the right either.
Well, yeah, I got an interesting take on that, Ron, because he just came out a few days ago and said he's going to ban Kanye West. And Kanye West made a lot of anti-Semitic comments, or however you want to interpret them. And Elon Musk's, this is on the tails of Kanye going on an Alex Jones show where Elon had said, well, I'm not going to let Alex Jones back on, because he talked about, the murder of kids and stuff like that. And he goes, I had my child die in my arms, so I just don't like him. So why is Elon Musk giving arbitrary ban decisions better than the old Twitter people giving arbitrary bans? It's not necessarily an improvement, even though Elon's making decisions we currently agree with. It's either free speech or it's not.
Right. That's a great statement right there.
Yeah. So, I love what Elon's doing.
And let's not forget, he's not necessarily an ally. The guy's a transhumanist, for God's sake, but he is doing what he can for free speech, and that's a good thing, but free speech goes both ways. So once again, getting back to your statement, exactly right. We don't want him banning one side or the other and say, all right, now he's conservative, he's banning the left. No, we want everybody to be able to have that conversation, everybody to be in the arena of debate. That's what makes this country great.
Nobody should be making arbitrary decisions based on their own beliefs, feelings, stuff like that. There should be a strict set of rules. I don't want to live in a world where speech is dangerous. But violence is violence, speech is speech. When you conflate the two, that's where the problem starts. That's an issue. That's where your rules should be based around. You can say whatever you want with a couple of exceptions, which is instigating violence. People have a right to speak, and you have a right not to listen to them. That's what free speech is. Interesting. Something was sent to me today about Elon being a transhumanist, and I've been very skeptical about Elon Musk for many reasons. I don't trust the guy. I don't trust anyone. Besides two people on this show, which I do trust both of you. I'll give you guys that credit. Somebody sent me a reading list of Elon Musk, 9 books he recommends you read this year, and a couple of them were talking about transhumanism, but the dangers of artificial intelligence and how you can ethically live in that world. And the books that he was recommending people read has made me today take a step back and say, okay, he may not be the globalist transhumanist I thought he was, but he's still a megalomaniac with way too much power. We need to decentralize everything.
But is that your opinion, or do you know that for a fact?
Well, based on these 9, do I know? No, I've never met the man, so I don't know anything for a fact. I'm basing it on.
So that's your opinion.
Well, absolutely.
I tell you what, Ron, when we're at a dinner party with Elon Musk, we'll make sure you know about it.
Oh, I'm just saying. Listen. I'm not defending him or anything. I'm just saying the thing that we just detest is speaking something fact that you don't know is fact.
Yes,
you don't know he's a megalomaniac. That's your opinion.
I'm pretty confident he's a megalomaniac.
But that's your opinion. You can't. You're saying
that opinion is based on some pretty good obvious.
But you're speaking it factually, and you don't know.
No, I stated it as an opinion. I think he's a megalomaniac.
Okay, very well. Thank you. You stated your opinion. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
No, that's fair. I can't believe Ron's beating me up on opinion versus fact. Because darn it, I'm glad to see you come. I'm glad to see you come around on this one. And anyways, tomorrow, Harper v. Moore or Moore v. Harper. That's going to matter.
I think it will.
I just wish these decisions wouldn't take so long.
We're living in very interesting times.
We are living in very interesting times, and again, just you guys, FYI, I'm gonna bow out. I've got some work stuff that I have to get done, so I'm gonna go. It's 4:00, so I don't know if you're doing your class in
Capistrano. Yeah.
So
because my daughter-in-law is gonna get here to take Virginia to her car for the AAA. Basically, when they show up, so I'm gonna go ahead and do my class out there. But I had to cancel my Fallbrook one because otherwise I would have left my wife in the parking lot of the credit union, and I was ticked about it. But that's
all good. All good. Like I said, I need to go, but I just want to remind everybody that we are going to begin. I don't remember what the date is. I haven't looked at the calendar, but we are going to begin the Constitution again on the first Tuesday of January.
That'll be the second. I believe that's the 3rd.
Second or 3rd?
No, it is a 3rd. It is a no wait, because New Year's Eve is Sunday, so Monday. So it'll be the 2nd. I
thought New Year's Day was Sunday. Let's take a look. Since we're all confused,
it's going to be the 3rd.
New Year's Day is Sunday. New Year's Day is Sunday, so it will be the 5th. I'm sorry, the 3rd. Well, why now I got Thursday stuck in my head. So it'll be the 3rd. Yeah.
If only we had electronic devices that allowed us to find these things out quickly.
It's funny because that actually comes up in a show called Tulsa King with Stallone. I watched the first 2 episodes, and he's been a president for 25 years, and he says exactly that.
I have enjoyed this thoroughly. You guys can end when you're done talking.
We're done.
But I have got to go.
Adios, brother. Have a good one.
Doug, you got 2 more minutes. I was going to entertain these people with another interesting thought.
All right. I have 2.5. Go ahead.
See if I lost my train of thought yet already. Now, you're talking about the internet being this amazing tool of communication, and you've got the powers that be are trying to use it for censorship and stuff like that. Well, I was debating today, how did they manage in 1913 to convince people to pass the 16th and 17th Amendments in a convention of states? And I go, well, they had total control of the media, and there was no other source of information. Today, we've got the internet, and as much as they try to censor us, we're able to freely communicate in many ways. So we have a lot better defense today against institutionalized information or propaganda than they did 100 years ago. And the internet is the second printing press. It's the Gutenberg miracle all over again. That's how we first broke away. That's how we first broke away from lords and serfs, was because the printing press, and the internet's allowed us a second chance, to truly share information among ourselves without censorship. And I think it's important. And I think it ties into why a convention of states now is the time.
Right. Well, people are not only also more informed, sometimes not quite as accurately, but more informed, but we can get the information about what's going on more easily out there, as you are suggesting. And I think that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the internet was created by the U.S. government. It's been censored by big corporations and all the people who want to control us, and we found a way around it. And as long as that's the case, we're still free.
Well, it's funny because I made a mention today. My son was with my wife when I had to pick her up from the credit union. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not always in long conversations with the boy, mainly because usually I just want to strangle him. But it's beside the point. And he said, he said something about me texting and doing this and doing that. And I said, be honest with you, I'm not a fan of technology. I really, don't like it. I mean, it was a simpler day when I could just be left alone until I got home. Then my phone would ring, and he's like, Dad, all this technology, if it wasn't for that, you couldn't do what you do. So yeah, there is that.
Yep.
30. It is an important tool. We just have to make sure we don't abuse it.
30 years ago, nobody here would have ever heard of Douglas V. Gibbs. You would have to have gone to a library to find his book, and then you would actually have to have a reason to look for it in the first place.
Right.
Internet's an amazing thing if you use it right. Yeah. And that's exactly what Darren just said.
Mm-hmm.
If people use it in the right way, then of course it's always going to be abused, but that's our freedom.
Well, every tool gets abused. I mean, there's just as many. The murder percentage by hammer or by axe is not exactly a small number either. So, any tool can be misused.
All right, you want to sign us out of here?
I'll sign us out of here. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. DouglasVGibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. And I'm going to Capistrano to teach a class. I don't know about you guys, but it's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for joining us.
Good night, everyone. Thanks. Cheers. Happy birthday, Stephanie.